Welcome back to Research Debrief, the podcast that bridges the gap between the fitness industry and the latest science. Luke, what is our topic of discussion for today?
Rachel, today we're going to talk about a brand new paper published in a journal. The journal is literally called Sports. It's a systematic review and meta-analysis. So remember, a meta-analysis is a study of studies. It's a collection of all the studies in a particular topic. We pour some statistics over top of those studies and understand, well, what's the current state of the science. This paper is called Eccentric versus Concentric Training, a systematic review and meta-analysis on randomized controlled trials on performance and health benefits across diverse populations. So what they're really looking at is, what are the benefits of concentric versus eccentric? Now, concentric just means you are lifting a weight. Specifically, what concentric means is your muscle shortens. Every time we lift a weight, our muscle shortens. Eccentric involves lowering the weight. It involves our muscle lengthening. This is a meta-analysis to say, well, what works better to derive health benefits, and specifically across diverse populations? What should we expect from our concentric versus our eccentric training? This is one of the most interesting papers published in the last few years. So, Rachel, if it's okay with you, we'll dive right into it.
Yes, please.
Okay, eccentric and concentric muscle actions represent two fundamental modalities of resistance training with distinct physiological and functional properties. And I'm just walking through kind of the early parts of this paper. Eccentric exercise, characterized by muscle tension during active lengthening, so like we said, when you lower the weight, is considered particularly effective due to its lower metabolic cost, meaning when you do eccentric training, your heart rate is not as elevated as much. You're not as exhausted as you perform the exercise, allowing for high intensity exercises with reduced cardiovascular strain and perceived effort. So this means someone with cardiovascular disease can get more quality muscular work doing eccentric work, and they're not providing or presenting a significant cardiovascular stimulus. It's probably safer for someone with cardiovascular disease to do eccentric training. In terms of adaptations, eccentric training has been shown to enhance maximal strength, rate of force development, which is how fast we can produce force or demonstrate strength, hypertrophy, which is our muscle size, muscle power, which is our ability to do work in a period of time, while also promoting favorable metabolic effects such as improved insulin sensitivity and glycemic control. Now, that is basically all of the reasons that we engage in strength training. What I really want to call out here is when we talk about power and rate of force development, what we used to do, we used to relegate those benefits or those adaptations to athletes. What we've looked at over the last few years is it turns out that power and rate of force development are predictor of death from all causes. They're great predictors. They're positively associated with all-cause mortality. So as we age, we know that the stronger we are, the harder it is to kill us. Strength is connected to longevity, but our power is connected to longevity as well. And we want to retain power as we age, and in fact, we lose power faster than we lose strength as we age. So at the age of 50, we're probably as strong as we were when we're 30, but we're definitely not as powerful because we lose fast twitch muscle fibers faster. This paper is saying eccentric training is a great way to improve our power and to improve our rate of force development. So let's walk through a couple of the key take-homes from this paper. The present study demonstrates that eccentric exercise produce moderate to strong effects on muscle strength, power, and hypertrophy across diverse populations, including healthy individuals, older adults, and patients who have COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. The largest benefits were observed in explosive strength and maximal voluntary contraction. Okay, and that's important, again, because we lose our explosive strength, we lose our power as we age, and all the literature, all the researchers right now are trying to understand, as we get into our 60s and 70s and 80s, how do we retain this? These findings reinforce the value of eccentric training for enhancing neuromuscular performance. Here's the key part: particularly in aging or clinical populations where preserving functional capacity is critical. For practitioners, incorporating eccentric modalities, whether standalone or combined with concentric, could be an essential tool in rehab and performance settings. What a powerful paper. What this is saying is, if you do concentric training, which means you lift the weight, or if you do eccentric training is far more valuable for strength and muscle size and muscle power, and specifically for these clinical populations. Now, we've done some eccentric training in the past, but we've normally looked at eccentric training for athletes. We've looked at eccentric training even for bodybuilders. This important paper says eccentric training is valuable for all of those benefits, but it's even more valuable for our clinical populations. Now, we don't have to choose between concentric and eccentric, because generally when we do strength training, we're lifting it and we're
putting it down.
Right? Okay, we do both. But what we have to understand is most people, when I say most people, the vast majority of people that engage in resistance training lift it, so they're doing the concentric, but they generally tend to drop the weight. They minimize the eccentric. What this paper is telling us is we should lift the weight, but we should control the lowering of the weight. We should lower the weight slower to get more eccentric work. Most people drop the weight and they skip out on the eccentric. And this paper is telling us the eccentric is far more valuable than the concentric. Stated otherwise, most people that strength train are missing the most valuable part of strength training. If we were smart, we wouldn't say, hey, I'm going to go to the gym to lift weights. We'd say, I'm going to go to the gym to lower weights, because lowering the weight is more valuable than lifting it. Of course, you have to lift it in order to lower it eventually. But that's the key take-home message. Now, we should lower the weight slowly. That's our eccentric training. Of course, we're still going to lift it. But we can be a little bit more open-minded to who this is good for. This is great for clinical populations. If you have members that are in their 60s, 70s, and 80s, this is exactly what they should be doing. And when we talk about benefits like power and rate of force development, always been important for athletes, we now understand this is critically important for our older adults. Eccentric training is the best way to improve those important qualities.
So if I'm a gym that has personal trainers as well, this is a paper and that we need to make sure that they're reading.
Absolutely. I'd have every personal trainer read this, and we'd have discussion around, hey, we have to lift the weight, clearly. We have to lower the weight much slower, and let's make sure we understand what all those benefits are and who those benefits are important for. And in this particular case, it's important for our 22-year-old athletes. It's also really important for our 70, 80, and 90-year-olds, our clinical populations.
Yeah. No, I love this because it's so empowering. It almost seems sometimes like it's too granular, like, oh my gosh, do we really need to be focusing on both the lifting and, how we're dropping the weight? But, information is just so empowering. And for a personal trainer to be able to go to a client and explain the science behind what they're coaching them on, I think that just adds to the credibility so much.
Absolutely, Rachel. And you could make an argument that this paper suggests most of what's going on in our health clubs worldwide, we are missing the boat on where the real value is. So this is, you said granular. It is granular, but we're missing, keep the main thing. We are missing the main thing, which to me is not a depressing message. It's an encouraging message. There's better outcomes that we could get from our resistance training across all populations.
Yeah, makes sense.